having that confidence in myself, simply knowing that I am able to solve problems in a very creative way, applying new technologies and finding what is valuable.
Hello and welcome to Day One Diaries, the podcast where we're speaking to founders who are figuring it out in real time. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Manu Ravio. Manu is the CEO and founder of Formidable, an AI startup in the form space. Now, if you look at Manu's CV, you might say it was all building to a career in entrepreneurship. He worked at Google, in product, in deep tech, now in AI. But as you'll hear in the conversation, that was never the plan. He wasn't building a startup CV. He was following what interested him, he was taking on responsibility, and he was solving problems, growing the skill set that you need to start your own business. And that's the thing that stood out to me in this conversation. His ability and his willingness to tear up the playbook, not just at Formidable, but throughout his career. No perfect runway, no master plan, just a curiosity and a willingness to start small and build from there. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Manu. It was so much fun to record. And if you want more of this content, remember we've got a new episode of Day One Diaries every month. Manu, you're very welcome to Day One Diaries.
Hello, happy to be here.
Good. Great to have you on board. So, love you to tell us, first of all, who are you? And tell us a little bit about your business.
My name is Manu. I'm the founder and CEO of Formidable. What we do is that we've taken the humble old form on a website and added AI into it. Instead of the usual B2B sales process going like, you fill in a form, you wait for someone to get in touch with you, you arrange a meeting, and then you hope that they can solve your problem. The second you submit a form, it actually turns into a conversation. It uses the form fields to enrich that conversation, to make it live in that live situation relevant to you personally, and does a whole bunch of discovery and qualification tasks in the first couple of minutes after submitting the form. And so let me put it this way. AI is not going to take anyone's job. It's going to unbundle it and remove some of those tasks. And so we're moving pre-sales tasks directly into the entry points. And so it doesn't, by the way, have to be a form. It can also just be an CTA, like join a wait list, or give us your email address, and so on and so on. And so forms and AI-based CTAs.
We'll come back to Formidable in a few minutes, but before we do, tell us a little bit about what you did before you decided to start this business.
In the beginning, I'm gonna put beginning for me in around 30 years ago, primary school times, and 1994-ish, Finland. That's where I'm from originally, by the way. Hello, I'm
Right.
from Finland, live in Berlin, and lived in a number of places in between. We had a PC in the janitor's closet. And I was in fourth grade, and some of the older kids in sixth grade of primary school almost knew what they were doing, and so there was what was called a Q Basic Club. And so I was always the one who couldn't really code, but I had the ideas of what we could be doing and should be doing. And so the older kids were good at the coding and copying code literally from print magazines, because that was the distribution method at the time, and running games. I mean, that's what we were obviously doing as kids, playing games. And so I think I've always had this fascination for what you can do with computers, and in particular, indeed, what can be achieved with it that is of some value, rather than the IT or programming as a end valuable of itself, And so that is the beginning, and I think that thread has continued throughout my whole life. That has always been a passion of mine. What can we do with IT? What can we do with computers? However, I studied politics
Right.
And nonetheless, still throughout even the studies, always gravitated towards all these little IT projects I was running, some little development projects of my own that were mostly copying code and somehow making it run magically, but never for fun, always for a purpose. Like creating a backup system for my dissertation folder, or publishing pictures from a festival before we had pictures on Facebook or Instagram onto a web page and
Right.
stuff like that, right? Um, then went on to work at Google in the ad space of publisher ads, and they're developed very quickly within the customer-facing organization into a more sort of technical specialist role, which then led down the path finally of product management. Worked for 5 years so after Google in Finland in a 3D deep tech startup. First as just running the support operations, but then developing all the way to heading the entire commercial team and in charge of product management. And so running product for the company. They were acquired by Amazon. Shook hands with Amazon in that I went, and then but knew that that was not my spot after having done American Corporation One, being
Yeah.
Google. I didn't think that two was going to, this is not. I knew that it was not going to be my spot, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, right before starting Formidable, a couple of no, just for a year in a AI startup here in Berlin as a product manager.
From there, in some way, shape, or form, you came up with the idea for Formidable. Talk us through what inspired you on that front.
Yeah, so I was in that situation where I was applying for jobs, and at the same time, really struggling to fit a mold, if you
Mm.
will, because of the background. It's not like I had 10 years of experience in anything. I had a couple of years of experience in everything, with a very high penchant towards technical stuff, but not an engineer. And so I was really struggling to fit a mold of anything of that seniority and experience that I had in companies. And then a couple of things happened at the same time. While I was looking for work, I built a 0 to 1 project. So a young Finnish entrepreneur's um, vision of a platform connecting hotels and influencers for influencer marketing. And he had an idea, but didn't know how to build the damn thing. And so I, from a product management perspective, structured that and with a team of hired engineers. So just from an engineering AI, sort of, no AI, sorry, IT consultancy,
Yes.
um, built that 0 to 1 prototype, if you will, MVP, um, which I think it was a formative experience in the sense that it is exciting to go from there is nothing, seeing that actually happen, how quickly you can do that, and how the right approach to doing that is not planning too much up front, having a vision of what it should be is like the goal. This is where we want to get to, but not mapping out everything in between, because actually you learn so much while you're doing it about what you should really be doing that this sort of longer plan doesn't. It gets so old so quickly. But
Yeah.
seeing something that appearing from nothing to having something in a couple of months, really kind of, let me say, opened my eyes to the possibility of getting this done, and actually me having that the ability to lead a team to deliver something like that. So that was
Yeah.
like number one sort of experience in that. The other one was not really fitting anywhere, and then the third one was these language models that were popping up everywhere, all kinds, new one every week. Like the pace of development at that time, in terms of like how often there was something new, was just insane. Really struggling to keep up, which was
Yeah.
fun as well. But I was fascinated, absolutely fascinated by this new piece of technology that was, as what I would call the most humane piece of tech that I had ever come across, because of those language abilities. And then all of this ties back to that idea of, okay, well, that is technically interesting, but where's the real value? You know,
Yeah.
what is the actual value here? And there were a couple of things in that where, like I would call them core epiphanies, um, in terms of the impact that is going to have on just generally the way we build products and the kinds of products that we build. Um, was their ability to structure language into categories, into entities. So, I can say a sentence and then interrogate that sentence. Tell me what is the tone of voice here? What is the fundamental intent? What is the subtext? Um, and not just being able to, I'm not going to say, so all of that, a lot of that already out of the box. So no training needed. You literally just ask questions and it does that. Um, and that changed a lot of stuff because all of a sudden we're in a situation where you don't have to think, and you can't even, all of the cases up front, but you have to come up ways in which you, let me say, narrow down somehow still the world of opportunities
Yeah.
in order to get something valuable out of a product. So very, very interesting and fascinating moment, and just ended up testing a lot of stuff with one of, like a developer buddy of mine, who's now the CTO of Formidable as well.
Right. Okay. I find that interesting when, like you say, some people have a job and they're thinking, I'm going to start this business and they start
Mhm.
on the side. And other people we've talked to have thought all that through. They've thought about their financial runway and they've started putting things in place for their business, etc. But you were more in the, okay, I'm here with a bit of time and space now, and I really like this subject. I wonder what I could do with it.
Mhm.
And that's a different approach or a different sort of origin story to many people in the entrepreneurial space. Do you feel at that point the series of roles and jobs you've had were gearing you up for being ready to be an entrepreneur and try something on your own?
In a way, yeah. And I think that the most important one was probably the 3D tech company in Finland. I think it is in particular the culture there.
Mm,
Um, very flat from a hierarchical perspective, um, but also, fundamentally just demystified a lot of, what it is to start and run a company. When you're in a company of 20 people, I mean, it's, in that context, once I was part of the management team there, for the last couple of years, we had like a month of runway, always,
mm,
forever, or eternal runway, but with a month of, actual runway in the bank. And
yeah.
so if the revenue forecast, is actually materialized as it had for the last 10 years, you could run the company forever like this. But if something doesn't go as planned, then we'll know within a month. Right? And so it was, for a couple of years, that is a relatively sort of short horizon to have on your mind, all the time. Um, but also I think that in general, the CEO, just had a very, I'm gonna call it, open philosophy of where are we with the company, what's happening, what's good, what's not good, so on and so on. And so showed that, it's sort of like there's nothing special to it, that there isn't like a magic, you know, characteristic or formula that you need to somehow
To
be
run a
something special.
company or anything.
It is what you do that matters,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so I think that was helpful in understanding that, okay, so this is how it just literally is run. This whole thing is just, uh, you know, you put numbers, and we make, this is something that happens in corporations and in bigger companies. We make things sound fancier than they are. You know, you put
Mm,
you put fancy concepts, attach them to very basic things. Like talking to customers. is, research or whatever. Like I'm just saying, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It gets
the activities
commoditized
are
and like
mundane fundamentally.
yeah.
Um, and so having seen that, the other key experience there was um, being a what we called earlier Plan B, and having done that relatively successfully, I had that confidence in myself, simply knowing that I am able to solve problems in a very creative way, applying new technologies, um, and finding what is valuable in a sort of, let me call, fundamental piece of technology like language models.
Mm,
Um, Having done that before at Umbra, so the 3D technology company, and I think that that helped. It
mm.
just, even in the moments of doubt, which you always are going to have. On some days you go, what the why, what am I, this is it, this is a terrible idea. I have it, it why, what did I do, this is never going to work. um to be able to somehow from somewhere find that like belief that, but if we get past today or tomorrow, it'll
Yeah.
be okay, because now you just need to do this in order to be able to do that later, right? And so those, I think those were important um experiences in leading to that moment, just kind of throwing myself at this um, piece of tech.
Wow. That's a really interesting attitude. And I think it fits really well with where you are. And to go back to that, so yourself and your now CTO were playing around on what LLMs can do. You're worried we're going to try and boil the ocean here, so let's narrow down. How did you come into the forms that these can do more if you put the power of LLMs behind?
Yeah. um, it took a good couple of months doing something completely different. Um, and I'll just say this: I did not have personal runway for a couple of years, which would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
I did not. It was limping along, couple of months at a time, not really knowing. And I've got a kid, was paying off divorce. It, so let me put it this way: from a perspective of, if you're doing from looking at the, what do you call it? How to set up a company, chapter one. Make sure that you've got, like your house in order. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm gonna rip out chapter one. I'm not gonna look at that because that does not apply here. And but I do think that that probably is also something that I personally maybe needed.
Yeah.
Is that some level of pressure, some urgency, some sort of like a couple of months at a time type of mind frame, at least at the early stages. And so we started with just trying things out. The initial, so the first um, productization of something was that you could just open up your mic and ask a question on a website. So any website, ask a question, and the AI would literally navigate you to a section of the website where that answer is. So if it's on the same page, it'll scroll down, it'll find the answer for that. So it was like an intent classification system and mapping that to particular sections of a website. Um, Took some weeks to build, not too long.
Mm.
CTO Piotr. But the point is that tried that and I was like, very cool, but so what? I still like,
Yeah.
what is this? What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Um, at the same time, and I was at the start, I was adamant that I'm not going to, create yet another chatbot. What is it going to do? Well, we thought a bit of support, maybe a bit of sales, a bit of customer discovery. Too many things, and I think that this is part of my syndrome. Is seeing so many opportunities that narrowing down is hard because you're like, well, that's just such a small thing. Why would you just do such a small thing? And it turns out that that's exactly what you need to do at the start of a company. You go very narrow and solve a problem in a narrow space and do that really well, and then you can expand. but a small wedge allows you to focus to do something extraordinary in that small space, which is then the building, let me say, the fertile ground on which to build upon more things with
Yeah.
the same degree of quality. And so that was aimed at SMBs, and then it was not working. Like nobody really got it. It was difficult to communicate. I tried to raise money, and people were like, "You're too early, and there isn't traction, and there isn't um, product, and blah blah blah." And I was sort of stuck, like
Mhm.
literally stuck with, like knowing that there's something here, but not being quite sure what. The core realization came through showing the stuff that I've been doing
Mm.
to early collaborators, potential partners, pitching it, trying to sell it, and getting this feedback that, you know, already at that point I was focusing. So if all we did was discovery, early customer discovery, instead of, like waiting for somebody to call you, he could ask you like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's your main pain point? Schedule, budget, purchasing authority, just the basics before the salesperson comes in, allows to have a much richer picture of what your prospects are there for. But I was doing that in a conversational format, asking each question at a time. Hi, what's your name? What's your profession? Oh my God, it was tedious. And the feedback was that, well, you can't introduce any friction into the process. And so right now, all they have is a booking form, get a call. They'd rather just speak with everyone than add any friction to people getting in touch with them. And there was a particular company they were literally just capturing the email address. And I was asking myself, and that was literally the boundary for them. There cannot be, don't even care about your name.
Yeah.
We do not want to add any friction to stop you from handing over your email address. And so I asked myself, like, how could we solve this even for them, even in their, like context? And then it just occurred that, well, we can start with capturing just the email address and then turn that into a conversation there. Like literally the form field that you have, I think it was more of a visual sort of epiphany. That form field with email and a little send button is fundamentally no different from the input field on a chatbot and the send button. And so all we needed was the little bit on top to put the conversation in. And so the first prototype was that just expanded into a conversational interface. And then it all clicked. That all of a sudden made sense, because then I knew that, well, there are millions and millions of these forms online. They're all static. They don't do anything. The form information itself allows us to do research with AI. So we're just going to take your email address, run lead enrichment. We know who you are, your work history, all this stuff from public sources. Your email domain, visit the website, figure out what the company does. Then on a per case basis, find the relevant information for the business. So for us, for example, we'd analyze your sales funnel. But for an innovation consultancy, you'd look for signals of any types of innovation programs or anything that might exist publicly that hints towards their work in your particular field, etc., etc. And being able to bring all of that in as context immediately into the conversation, so that it's this is the beauty of LLMs. The moment you enter that context, so that information into its context, it changes already the language it speaks. It's already tailored to you, your world, your profession, your stuff, right? And the experience was delightful. And so and then finally knowing that, well, it's brilliant because from a distribution perspective, we don't need to ask you to change your sales process on day one, or even your uh, technology stack. We literally just hijack the form. The form stays, and all we do is that once it's submitted, so after it's submitted, everything stays the same on day one. As if the eponymous podcast. Day one, nothing changes, right? And so the form just turns into a conversation, and we do that further discovery. Um, and so
I
that
love that. I love that idea that, like, you're really taking that advice of the, like, find the edge of something, and I'm going to say play around. But if you give yourself such constraints and you say, the only thing I'm going to get, the only friction is give me your email address. It's the only thing you're going to get. And even as you said that, I thought, oh man, what could you do with that? But as you say, there's information you can pull out of anything. The company they work for, is it a work address, a personal address? What other profile information can you find out? Their LinkedIn, all this stuff. You could form a conversation like relatively quickly, at least engaging enough for the person to give you a little bit more information, and then you to utilize that and turn that into a more structured sales opportunity. It is interesting to see how far you could go with that, and a very very minute. And for you guys to give to work off that level of constriction, to then be able to build and expand and then see what else you can offer, I think is a really promising and exciting thing. And so leads me on to where is Formidable now?
And so the product is at a MVP stage. What I want to do is get the first couple of design customers live and prove a little bit of traction and raise a pre-seed round. And so I want to put us into a position of power in terms of the raise, which means that we have everything that is needed, and on top of that, a good plan of how we're gonna use the funds to not just develop the product further, but actually go to market. And so it is more in the sort of let's expand from here, like we kind of know what we're doing type of thing, and then bring on a couple of core roles. So it is me and the CTO currently, and the way I'm thinking about hiring now is you want real generalists in a startup anyways. I think that it is better to find someone experienced and potentially pay them more and have fewer such individuals than a whole bunch of junior, inexperienced people, especially in a startup, where you have 5 or 6 people, like a small amount of people. And then we'll see. It's one of
Yeah,
those times when also the old org chart is out the window, and what you need is people who are going to figure out how do we build the new one and what does it look like.
got
And so
it.
that experience, but the ability to apply it in this new context is key.
Absolutely. Exciting times. So Manu, to wrap us up on something I always ask people who come on the show, you went through an interesting journey, and certainly in hindsight, whether it was by intention or not, looks like it set you up for what's a very exciting time at Formidable. But in this decision over this last few months of Verbose, which then turned to Formidable, are you happy you went out on your own?
Am I happy? Absolutely. Uh, even even through all the uncertainty, still in the middle of it, there's always moments that pick you up. There is that thing you did half a year ago that magically comes back and says, "Hey, I actually thought of you, thanks to that conversation, and we now need this, and could we set up a call?" Or whatever it is. And so actually what you put out into the world comes back to you.
Yeah,
You just don't know when and at what point. You get what you give. And I've never fundamentally been happier despite the uncertainty and the pain.
fantastic. All right. Well, Manu, we look forward to seeing the success of Formidable on into the future. We'll make sure there's a link to the site on the show notes so people can check it out. And best of luck in the future.
Hey, thank you, Brian, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.